Okay, so I have shared some videos with you, and it is expected that you should follow the steps and get your computers configured if you are using Windows operating system. Again, if not, if you are using your cell phones for these lectures, so I have again suggested you one of the app PyDroid, which is there, so you can use that app. Okay, so using that we can also do the programming. Okay, but before going for the actual Python programming, we will have to understand what is the context of that Python with the subject that we are going to study or we are studying in this semester. Okay, so as you know, the name of our subject is scripting language or scripting languages specifically. Okay, so in that context, today we are going to understand how the Python is related to that and what is the meaning basically of scripting languages. Okay, so what I'll suggest is that rather than just one-way communication, I'm speaking and I'm delivering the lecture and you are just going to listen it. Rather than that, what I'll suggest is just let's be interactive with this lecture and we will share the knowledge, okay, that we are having. Okay, so if there is anything that I wish to or you wish to add, we can add that in this, because the concepts that we are studying, whether it will be scripting languages, whether it will be Python, they are continuously evolving. Okay, there is no fixed benchmark as such. Each day, with every day, these concepts are evolving, new things are getting added into these concepts. So whatever we knew yesterday, which may be or may not be relevant for today. Okay, so accordingly, we will start to or we will try to get acquainted. We will try to understand everything uh, through this process only. Okay, so the name of our, as I've said, the name of the subject that we are studying, it is scripting languages. Okay, so basically it is composed of two words. Okay, scripting and languages. Okay, so just let's first go towards the one word that we know already, which is languages. Okay, so what do we mean by languages? Okay, so in the first year itself, we have already seen one of the language, which was C language. Okay, so using that C language, we have already completed one of that course. So we are acquainted with that concept, what language is. Okay, so a language is basically, we can say in vague way that a language is nothing but it is the way in which we in okay, in the context of computers here. Okay, the languages are in the context of computers, so a language is nothing but it is the way in which, or it is the language basically in which we are telling the computer to do something. Okay, we are getting our work done from the computer by telling it to do that. So C or any language that we have seen earlier, that you know, it is nothing but these are the instructions that are being given to the computer, okay, in the language that it knows, in the language that we know, and accordingly that computer will understand it. Okay, so let us go ahead. So we know what languages is now. Okay, now we will understand. Our next question is, what is scripting? Okay, so I want you, from you guys, what do you think scripting could be? Okay, I just want you to tell me. Okay, the chat box is open. You can type your message there. Okay, and I want to know from your side, what is your understanding of scripting, or whatever you know till now, or just go logically, just go with the sense of the words which are there, scripting languages, and what do you think the scripting could be? Okay, so I'm expecting messages, or I'm expecting reply from you. Okay, can anyone tell me what could be the scripting word? What could be the significance of scripting word here? Yes, you can type the message, or should I unmute you? You can type in whatever you think, or you can even raise your hand. I will unmute you. You can raise your hand. I will unmute you, and then you can reply. Anyone?
Hello, sir.
Yes.
तर स्क्रीनवर रेट हँड अँड चॅट बॉक्स नाहीच आहे म्हणजे ते ऑप्शन लॉक झालंय साईडला.
No, no, chat box will not be visible right away. You will have to click on my icon. Okay, then only it will be visible. The chat option is not available for everyone. It is not available to chat with everyone. You can only chat with me. So
ओके सर.
what you will have to do is just click on my icon. There only chat will be available, and then only you will be able to speak to me. Okay, it is not available to be visible to everyone else. Because
ओके सर.
okay, so yes, anyone wish to speak what scripting is? Or we are going to see that, by the way. But I just want you to know. I just want to know what is your understanding, or what could be that thing, scripting. You can unmute yourself and then you can speak. Anyone? Yes. Shubham, as is saying, the spaces at the start does matter. Okay. Anyone else? We'll see that in detail what that word means and everything about it. But from your side, anyone else, anything else you want to add? You can even unmute yourself and you can speak. You can raise your hand if you wish to. I will unmute you. But just yes, Nishigandha. Yes, anything you wish to say? Okay, scripting, as Sanket said, scripting is arranging in a particular manner. Okay, so as he's saying, scripting could be arranging in a particular manner. Okay, anyone else wish to say anything? Arya is saying particular method of writing. Okay, so basically, what I'm understanding here, or Supriya is saying, simply it is a formatting. Okay, so basically, you are taking it in the context of a script. Okay, so basically, if it is a script of a play, if you are considering script of a movie, so in that way you are trying to analyze it in terms of language, and that is actually the good way to understand this concept as well. Okay, so script word, whatever we know in the context of movies, in the context of play, the way or the thing that we are going to show on the film, that is written before. Okay, so that we are calling it a script, or the play that I'm going to perform, that is written beforehand. Okay, so that we are calling it as script. Okay, but right now in this subject, the scripting language is having some different significance. Okay, other than that, okay, the things that you are told, they are absolutely right. But other than that, also there is a significance to that word scripting. Okay, so what I'll do is we will just see the definition, what the definition of scripting is in the context of computers, in the context of softwares, in the context of your machines. Okay, so we will just see that definition which is there in the internet. I have specifically taken that from the Wikipedia page itself. Okay, because it is the most general way of looking at things. Okay, so we'll just see what that definition is telling us. Okay, and then we will try to analyze, or then we will try to understand what basically the scripting could be. Okay, so the definition says that a scripting or a script language is a programming language for a special runtime environment that automates the execution of tasks. Okay, I know if you read it at once, you will not understand anything, and not same case is with anyone. Okay, who is new to this concept. So only by reading this one line, you will not understand anything. Okay, so we will just try to segregate each and every part. We will try to understand each and everything. Okay, so what they're saying is a scripting or script language is a programming language for a special runtime environment that automates the execution of the tasks. Okay, so basically the thing here is that there are two weights, or there are two equivalents which are there in the software domain. Okay, one is called as programming language and other one is called as scripting language. Okay, so programming language, what it is, we already know about that. Okay, and the counterpart of that, or the opposite part of that, which is considered in software domain, it is called as scripting language. Okay, so they are two ways of coding. Both the things, they are there for coding only, but they are the two different ways of coding. Okay, just try to understand it, just don't go into that definition. We will try to see that definition again and we will try to understand it, but right now just try to focus on what things I'm going to tell you, because even if you search it on internet, even if you try to go in books and all, I will definitely tell you that it is the most confusing concept out there. Okay, in the internet itself also. So just try to understand it in the simplest way possible. Okay, so there are two things, as I've told you, there are two verticals, there are two things in the coding which are there. First is called as programming language, that we already know, we have seen what programming language is. We know various programming languages. C language is there, C++ language is there. You have already seen what C language is, you have already done that programming part. Okay, so we know everything about programming language. Okay, and the other thing is, which is called as scripting language. So what could be the different, or what could be the difference between programming language and scripting language? Okay, so that is the thing that we have to understand here. Okay, so what I'll suggest to you is that rather than just understanding what scripting is, we will try to analyze it comparatively. Okay, so we will see what is there in the programming language, and then we will try to understand how programming language is different than scripting language, and then we will try to understand what scripting language is. Okay, so we will go from what do we know and uh, what things we know, and then we will try to build upon that key what could be scripting language. Okay, so just one thing that you have to keep in mind is that the difference between a programming language and a scripting language is basically this. Okay, the slide that I have shown you in front of you right now, this is the only difference that you'll have to keep in your mind while understanding the difference between the two. Okay, in the programming language, there is a compiler, and in the scripting language, there is an interpreter. Okay, so this is the only basic difference that you will have to keep in mind while understanding the difference between the two. A programming language, as we already have seen, programming languages like C, programming languages like C++. Okay, so all those programming languages have a compiler. Okay, whereas all the scripting languages, they have interpreter. Okay, we are going to see what in detail what these two terms mean, but just keep in mind that compiler and interpreter, and the difference between the two, the difference between compiler and interpreter, that will be the difference between a scripting language and a programming language. Okay, so you have to tell me what is the compiler. Do you know what compiler is? Anyone? We have already seen that in the first year. Okay, what a compiler is. Can anyone tell me what is the function of a compiler? Yes, anyone? Okay, try to be interactive. As I've told you, this is not a theoretical or that derivation kind of subject. Let us not make it boring. Anyone? Yes. What is a compiler? It executes the code. What is saying? It executes the code. Uh, Anyone else? What is the specific function of a compiler? in any language. By the way, execution of the code is the task of your CPU, right? Shubham is saying into computer language. Yes, in the computer language itself. What is the meaning of compiler? It executes the code as Varat said, but basically execution task is given to your CPU, right? It will be responsible for execution. Gayatri is saying converts the coding language into assembly language. Very good answer. Okay, so basically compiler is nothing but it is converting one language into other. Okay, so as she said, it is converting higher level language into assembly language. Basically that is the very specific uh, way of, or that is a very specific task of a compiler. Okay, so the compiler is responsible for converting any higher level language into assembly level language. Okay, and there is one another thing that in the computers which is called an assembler that converts assembly level language into machine code. Okay, or the binary code that the computer understands. But in the vague way, in the computers the compiler is considered as an entity that converts higher level language into machine code. Okay, so whenever I say compiler, it is a combination of compiler as well as assembler. Okay, so in the vague way, compiler is nothing but it converts a higher level language like C, C++, Java, anything. It converts that into machine code. Okay, so the process that you already know, I'll just put that in front of you so that you can recall that. You have already seen this diagram various times in your first year. Okay, just take a review of that. We have an editor, we have a preprocessor, we have a compiler. Okay, and the task is written right over there. The compiler creates an object code and stores it on the disk. Okay, object code. So object code is nothing but your machine language code. So basically the task of your compiler is nothing but it converts your higher level language code into your assembly code or machine code. Okay, so that is the task of your compiler. Okay, but how different is interpreter, or what is the difference between interpreter? Before going for that, again, just understand one thing here is that the reason why I have put this diagram in front of you. Compiler, listen to this carefully. Compiler takes each and every line in the code. Okay, it takes the complete program and then converts that into your machine code. Okay, just remember this or just understand this line that I'm saying. Compiler, whatever the code that you have written on the editor, it might be of 1,000 lines. Okay, so what it will do is it will take the complete code and then it will convert that complete code into complete machine code. Okay, and then it will be given for linker, then it will be given for loader, and then it will be executed by the CPU. So the compiler takes complete code and converts that into machine code. If there is any error after or while it is compiling, if there is any error, it will show all the errors in the code in front of you. Okay, so just keep this difference in mind. It will show all the errors in front of you. You will have to change all the errors, and only when all the code is correct in terms of the syntaxes and all, then only it will allow you to execute the code. Okay, so again I am repeating the sentence that I have told you. Compiler will take whole code, it will compile that complete code. If there are any errors, it will prompt the user, it will ask the user to change those codes, change those lines in the proper way. Only after you have done all the errors, only after you have removed all the errors, then only it will pass the code for execution. Okay, so that is the thing with compiler. Whereas now observe same thing in interpreter. Okay, so I have drawn the same diagram on the upper side. How the compiler works: it takes the source code, it is given to compiler, the compiler will convert that into machine code. Right now just assume that it is into machine code. It is compiler is combination of compiler as well as assembler. Okay, so it will convert source code into machine code and it is given to output. Now observe what is happening inside interpreter. Okay, so interpreter is an entity that takes the source code and it does not compile it, it interprets the code. Okay, what is the difference between compiler and interpreter? So interpreter takes the line, the code line by line, and it starts executing each line of the code. Okay, just understand this difference. Interpreter doesn't take whole code and it compiles it at one go. It doesn't do that. What it does is it takes the code line by line, and it will if that line is correct, it will pass it for execution. If the next line is correct, it will pass it for execution. As long as your code is correct in terms of line, it will be passing that for execution. But if you find that there is an error in any particular line, the interpreter will ask, it will stop that execution, and it will prompt that error is there in that particular line. But the previous code would have been executed. Okay, so the simplest or the most basic difference between the compiler and interpreter is that compiler takes the whole code, it will compile it at once, and then it will pass it to the output for execution. Whereas interpreter, it does not do that. Interpreter will take the code line by line. If the line is correct, if first line of the code that you have given is correct, it will pass it for execution. If the second line is correct, it will pass it to the output. If the third line is correct, it will be, that is why it is called as interpreter, because it interprets the code for you. It interprets the code for the particular platform on which we are going to run it. Okay, so I think you have understood what is the difference between compiler and interpreter. If you have any doubt, you can ask me, because based on these concepts we are going to see the further part. Do you have any doubt, anyone, between compiler and interpreter, whatever I have told you right now? Anyone has any doubt between compiler and interpreter? Even the next slide will completely make you understand whatever I have told you. But even before going for that, I think I have made my point what the difference between a compiler and an interpreter is. Okay, and that is how the difference will be there between a programming language and a scripting language. Programming language makes use of compiler, whereas scripting language makes use of interpreter. Okay, now just observe the next diagram. You will understand everything that I have told you in detail in this simple diagram. Okay, in this simple image that I have put in front of you. Okay, so on the left hand side, and it is the very beautiful depiction of the concepts that we are that we are studying between compiler and interpreter. Okay, so whenever you are stuck with the difference between the two, just try to recall this image. Okay, so just understand what the image is telling us. On the left hand side, we are having compiler. Okay, compiler, what it is doing, it is taking, okay, that girl is there who is, suppose she is the compiler. Okay, and what she is doing is she's taking that complete book. Okay, there is, suppose that red book is written in some, suppose in the English language, and she is supposed to write that into Marathi language. Okay, so if she is the compiler, what she will have to do is she will have to read that whole book. Okay, and then according, after understanding that book, after reading whole book, then only she will be able to reproduce that book into other language. Okay, because she will have to understand all the context, she will have to understand all the concepts that are being told in that particular book, so that there will not be any ambiguity while she will be doing that another book in the other language. Okay, so that is the task of compiler. It will take the whole book at once. She will have to read that completely. If there are errors, she will have to modify it. And only if whole the things she have understood each and everything about that English book, then only she will be able to convert that into Marathi. Okay, so that is the thing in the compiler. Well, I just try to understand that right side image, which I have told you about interpreter. Interpreter is nothing but there is one alien shown. Okay, so what she in this interpreter, what she is supposed to do is she is the communicator between the two. Okay, so that alien entity, he is talking in its own language, and that person, he cannot understand the language which is being said by him, which is being communicated by him. So she is working there as an interpreter. So what she is doing is she is listening to each and every line that that particular alien is saying. Okay, and line by line she is converting that into the language that could be understood by that particular person. Okay, so you must be able to understand now what is the difference between compiler and interpreter. In the interpreter case, she is converting line by line understanding of hers into the language that will be understood by that person, whereas in the compiler case she will have to compile whole of that book, she will have to understand whole of that book. If there are any errors, she will have to modify that, or she will have to tell the user कि बाबा these are the errors that you will have to check on, and you'll have to modify that in the English book. And then only, or if she is not understanding anything in the English book, she'll have to ask that, and then only she'll be able to reproduce that in the compiler stage. Whereas in the interpreter stage, what she's doing is she's listening to that conversation. She doesn't have a lot of time. Okay, she doesn't have a lot of time in the interpreter case. She'll have to convert that as soon as she's hearing that particular line. Okay, so she will convert that accordingly. Okay, I think you must have all understood what is that difference between compiler and interpreter. Okay, so this is the thing that I wanted to tell you about compiler and interpreter, and this is the only difference that you will find between a scripting language and a programming language. So as we all know, as I've told you, there are various programming language like C, C++, Java, okay, that we have already seen earlier. And there are other scripting languages that are generally there, which are some of the examples I will tell you. Some of the examples are JavaScript, Python, Ruby, Perl. Okay, so these are some of the languages which are considered to be a scripting language. So what is or what thing I want to ask you right now is that depending on whatever things that I've told you right now, okay, depending on whatever concepts that we have seen till now, I want you to understand what could be the difference between scripting and programming. Okay, and why the scripting is needed. Okay, there are two questions now. Why was the need of what was the need of using scripting language, even though when we had a programming language? Why we were going for scripting language? Okay, and so second thing is, what is the difference between scripting and programming? So first of all, let us try to understand why scripting language was required. Okay, and I'll give you a simplest of the example so that you will understand it properly. So scripting language came into picture in the early 1960s. Okay, because what used to happen was programming languages were always there. Okay, so C language, C++, okay, with the invention of C, C++, and earlier languages, right, from BASIC and all. So programming languages were already there, and they were used to build very large applications or very huge applications. Applications such as web browser applications, such as games applications, such as softwares, they were built using programming languages. But the problem used to be there that if I wanted to enhance the capability of my software, if I wanted to enhance the capability of my game, if I wanted to enhance capability of my browser, then what I had to do was I had to again go to that particular language in which the code was written. I had to make modifications to that code itself, and the languages, programming languages, are generally considered to be difficult to understand. Okay, so that was not a very easy thing to do. So what came into picture was a scripting language. So scripting language is not a main language, it is the complementary language to your main programming language such as C and C++. So what is the task of scripting language? It gives you the flexibility to add to the functionality of a particular application or code. म्हणजे काय, suppose if I'm having a game, okay, if I'm running a game using C++, generally all the games are created using C++ language. Okay, so suppose I'm having that game and I want to add some extra functionality. Okay, you all must be familiar with the PUBG game. Okay, so that PUBG game is there, and it is suppose it is written in C language or C++ language. Then I want to add some functionality to it. म्हणजे functionality काय आहे की बाबा there are various weapons and all. Okay, so I want to add to that. So I need not have to go again in that whole main code, and I will have to make the changes in the case if the scripting was not there. So what scripting is providing you, you can do the minor changes in your main application. Okay, so that minor changes could be done using scripting language, and the requirement is that if you have to do such minor changes, the language should be very easy. Okay, so that is the reason why the scripting languages came. Those languages like JavaScript, the languages like Python, the languages like Perl, they were basically came into picture to make these minor changes or to add to the functionality. This is the most basic or simplest way of understanding what scripting is. Okay, so the basic difference is that programming language, they are difficult, okay, to understand. Scripting language, they are simpler, okay, because they are only going to add to the functionality. Okay, they are not going to be they are not going to be used for creating huge applications. So that is the thing with the scripting and programming. Okay, so what or which language could be called as a scripting language? Okay, by the way, do one thing before leaving, before going further. In the chat box, uh, just put your roll numbers. Okay, just write the roll numbers, your roll numbers to me, and I will take your attendance. Okay. By the way, general guidelines of a scripting language. Okay, just try to understand it. What is the general guideline of a scripting language? And I will tell you again that right now in the today's world, there is very less, there is very less uh, difference between the two. Okay, I will tell you in the today's world, in the earlier stages in the 1960s 1980s, there was a huge difference between a scripting language and a programming language. But in the today's world, in the today's software domain, the scripting language and programming language difference is very small. But there are some general guidelines which are there so that a language could be called as a scripting language. So what things are there? So a language can be called as a scripting language when, or it should be intended for small scripts, not large programs. As I've told you, they are not used to create large programs. They are just there for small programs. Okay, it should be embedded in another application and be used for small modifications of that application. So as I've told you, it is not for building larger programs, it is only to do smaller modifications. Okay, it is interpreted rather than compiled. So we have already seen what is the difference between interpretation and compilation. Okay, so it is interpreted rather than compiled. Again, it is intended more for novice programmers, not for professionals. Okay, so generally novice programmers means in the PUBG term we call it as noobs. Okay, so basically that is nothing but the new programmers. For them it is intended, whereas professionals prefer the programming languages. Okay, it is, its name generally start ends in script. Okay, the name of that language generally ends in script. So JavaScript is there, but again I'll tell you that is not the entirely specific definition. The problem with this thing is that the languages like Perl, Ruby, all those languages, they do not end in word with script. Okay, so this is only a general guideline which was there earlier. A scripting language is a programming language. Always understand, always know this, that scripting language is always a programming language where all errors are detected at runtime rather than compile time or compiled before. Okay, so each line is given for execution and errors are only detected at the compile time only. Compile time only, sorry, at the execution time only in the interpreter or in the scripting language. Whereas in the case of programming language, whole code is compiled at once and there only the errors are detected at the compiler stage. Okay, so that is the difference between your scripting language and programming language, scripting language. Okay, so again, I have given one distinction between scripting language and a programming language. So there are types of language. Type of language. So scripting language is interpreter based. Programming is a compiler based. Usage to combine existing components. Okay, and programming language, it is to develop from scratch. Okay, so programming language, you are using it to develop from scratch. You are using it to build your whole code. Okay, running inside another program independent of a parent program. Conversation, high level instructions converted into machine language, full program converted to machine language in one time. We have already seen the design makes coding simple and fast, gives full access to the language. Compilation, no need to compile, needs to compile first. Again, file type does not create any file type, creates an exe file. Take this into account. Programming languages creates an executable. Okay, there is no executable as such in the scripting. Coding type, small piece of code is there, whereas it is a full program. Time to develop takes less time. Okay, more time. Okay, obviously. Again, complexity, easy to write, obviously again, and it is programming language, it has to take write a complete code, so it is difficult. Interpreter, it is based interpreted in another program, whereas standalone compile is there for your programming language. Okay, so this much difference is there in the interpreter and your programming language. And the scripting language, okay, just understand here is that Python is both scripting language as well as programming language. Okay, it was previously intended, it was previously taken as a scripting language, but right now Python can be used to build complex programs as well. So it is a scripting language as well as a programming language. So that is the reason why we are going to study Python in our course. Okay, so just understand this, that Python, the need or why we are studying Python is that Python is a scripting language as well as it is a uh, your programming language. Okay, so I think you have understood my point, what I wanted to make. Okay, if you have any doubts, you can ask me. If you have any doubts, you can ask me. Anyone? Have you understood what I have told you? Have you understood what I have told you? Yes? Anyone wish to say anything? I think I have made my point. What a scripting is, what what a programming language is. Okay, so a simple, just keep that in mind. The simplest difference is that one is based on compiler and the other one is based on your interpreter. Okay, that will be the only difference that will be there in terms of a programming language and a scripting language. Anyone? Any doubt? If you want to ask anything, you can ask me. And the reason why we are studying Python, okay, so the Python is again, we don't have much of the time, okay, so it will terminate anytime soon, the meeting will, okay, but I think you have understood. If you have any doubt, you can ask me regarding your scripting and programming. Okay, anyone, any doubt? You can unmute yourself and ask me if you have any doubt. If you have any doubt, you can ask me. And just remember that image, one image only. Okay, that one image will tell you everything. Just recall that image whenever you are asked about programming and scripting. That one image itself will tell you everything between the programming language and the scripting language. Okay, but one thing that I've already told you, the difference is very less right now. There is almost no difference between scripting language and a programming language. A scripting language can be used as a programming language. A programming language can be used as a scripting language. There is one application called V8 for Google Chrome. So that is using JavaScript as a programming language. Okay, so there is no logic in that actually. So actually the logic is there, but the thing is that there is no distinction as such because of the advanced machines and advanced technologies that we are in the world today, that are there in the world today. So in that context there is no difference as such, but I have made sure that I will try to explain you as much as possible regarding the difference between the two. But just keep in mind that both can be used interchangeably. The only thing that matters is the platform on which you are using. If you are doing it from the scratch, it is programming.